not everybody that's in a position of authority is a leader, and that is okay. Leaders inspire. Every organization needs both. We need both leaders and we need managers and administrators. Administrators focus on execution while managers focus on planning and the managing of people themselves. These are very important differences. We need to stop pretending that everybody's a leader, saying that let's have these great executives, let's have them focus in their strength areas.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, we are always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lembi, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by Curtis Hite. He's the CEO of Improving, a company that he founded in 2007 that's grown to over 2,000 employees, 17 offices, and more than $280 million in revenue. And we're going to get into why he thinks that we need to stop bashing capitalism and we need to start elevating it. I'm also going to ask him to talk about Improving's internal platform. I think it's really cool. It's called Engage. We're also going to explore why Curtis believes that trust isn't a soft skill. It's actually the foundation for his culture at Improving. And finally, Curtis is going to break down for us why he thinks that not every executive needs to be a leader, and how understanding the roles of leaders, managers, and administrators is the key to scaling smart. So Curtis, you said that we need to stop bashing capitalism and start elevating it. What do you mean by that? And why is that so important, especially these days?
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan and proponent of capitalism. That's not to say that it doesn't have its shadows and shortcomings, but if we really look objectively at what capitalism has done for not only our country, but the world, it's completely transformed it over the last 200 to 250 years, right? Back at the turn of the 17th to the 1800s, about 90% of the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, less than 8% lives in extreme poverty. If we look at literacy, we've gone from about 12% to 88%. If we look at health, we've gone from an average about 28 and a half years to close to 70. These are all things that have been brought about by capitalism, the innovation that's there. And of course, there are shadows. There are shadows of fraud and corruption and greed. But overall, capitalism is lifting humanity from one state to another. And so it's again, we're not here to say that capitalism is perfect. In fact, I do some presentations on what we can do to improve it. But we need to stop really trying to bash the foundation that we've been upon, but we've been built upon, and start to try to celebrate and now elevate. So let's celebrate what it's done. Let's not stop the great work that it's done, but let's make it better.
I mean, you bring up some great facts right there. Poverty, life expectancy, literacy. What do you think is one of the biggest myths out there right now that people are looking at capitalism so negatively?
Well, it's really about how facts are framed, right? We look at the gap between, let's say, the extreme poor and the extreme rich. And yes, it is growing. That's actually a factual. But I think more important facts are like, what percentage of the world is actually living in extreme poverty? And overall, humanity is lifting and the gap becomes less relevant rather than looking at, are we raising lives out of this extreme poverty into a more acceptable living lifestyle? And another thing to understand is even as recent as the 1960s, lifestyle expectancies are changing. And so when we look at certain facts, there's always a framing. And are we doing a good job of telling the story? In the 60s or 50s, I forget which, the average home was maybe a little bit under 1,000 square feet. This is your upper middle class, right, that are living in 1,000 square feet. Today, we hear about how housing is unaffordable, but the average house is 2,300. And so is the cost per square foot really going up when we look at inflation and other things, the number of people living in houses? There's just a lot of facts that come out there that people state to make a point rather than trying to be objective. And again, almost everything we look at when we look at capitalism, it has elevated our lives. We have to continue to elevate capitalism itself and take it to a new stage. And I think stakeholder capitalism is a step in the right direction, but the organization that I'm active in and the concept of conscious business and conscious capitalism is yet the next tier in this evolution.
Yeah, and for those of us or out there who are unfamiliar with the flavor of conscious capitalism, can you share with us a little bit about how it works?
Sure. Conscious capitalism is, one, it's a movement. Two, it's an organization. And three, it's a concept. I'm going to talk mostly about the concept itself. It's rooted in the concept that fundamentally business is a great force of good in this world. And again, I think when you look at the overall facts, that can almost be undeniable. But it's not as great of a force as it actually can be. And so, one, business is a benefit to humanity. Two, now there are four pillars about this. The first is we're built with companies that have a purpose beyond making profit, not instead of profit, beyond making profit. The second one is committed to a conscious culture. The third is a stakeholder model, not a shareholder model. It's not just about the shareholders, even though the shareholders are the ones usually putting the money at risk, taking the largest risk, are the last to get their returns. It's still not just about them. We should take other stakeholders in the model into consideration, but not necessarily equally. And then finally, committed to conscious leadership. And those are the four pillars, and it's more of a framework than a prescription. One of the things I like to say, there's a difference between stakeholder capitalism and conscious capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism often relies on coercive forces, coercion to make things happen. And conscious business is about inspiring other businesses, not requiring other businesses.
No, I like that. It's inspire, not require. And we've seen some of that over the last couple of years. If you look at whether it's DEI initiatives or other things out there where, if they could just be reframed differently, I think you get more and better buy-in.
Absolutely. It's the framing. And sometimes words can be misleading or they get associated with something that becomes negative. I think there's a little bit pushback these days to the term DEI. Yet it's hard for me to find people that are actually against the fundamental principles of DEI. And let's take inclusion. The E tends to be more controversial than the D or the I in that term. I think one of the reasons is it's not well defined. So people make up whatever definition it suits them on one side of the political or the other. But I have not met the business leaders that want to create an environment, a hostile environment that's prejudiced, that tries to suppress. That's not going to work well for businesses and in the long run. And therefore, these principles are good, but sometimes the language gets us off track. I love to give this as an example. During COVID, which we're all familiar, we were told to socially distance. I think that was rooted in really good motives, right? And yes, I'm from the South, but that tends to have a very different view of this than the North or the West or the East. But we're told to socially distance. And guess what we did? We socially distanced. And it led to unprecedented mental health challenges.
And resentment.
We did what we were told. Yet, if somebody had said, listen, let's physically distance, but socially connect, then maybe we would have had a better result, because what they really meant was let's not socially disconnect. And so the power of words results become very, very important in what gets associated. And so that's where I find ourselves on subjects like that again. And we need to inspire others to pull this back in, right? Not just force people into initiatives, because people, I think it's psychologically called reactance, where people will resist when they are forced.
No, absolutely. I mean, from a personal level, when my wife forces me to do something, I'm a lot more resistant than if I'm asked nicely. It's just framing it
in the first place. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a human trait. I haven't studied the psychological aspect yet enough, but it seems to be true. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for our listeners out there, I want to get to Curtis's backstory, because we're sitting around here talking about conscious capitalism and how that can impact business or whatnot. But I don't want to give away too much. But I mean, his company, Improving, has won a ton of awards, both for growth and for culture. So, Curtis, let's start with your backstory a little bit. I mean, you talk about how you've had 3 jobs in your life, and so walk us through that a little bit.
All right. I had a lot of interns, but coming out of my early years and coming out of college, I was hired into the defense sector by a very large company. It was called Raytheon. Actually, at the time, it was E-Systems. It got acquired by Raytheon. I was 139662. That should tell you kind of my employee number. I was a number. And that's part of becoming part of a large company. Good or bad, there's a lot of stability there. Right, the work was really fantastic. If you got to understand what we had clearances and we're doing really interesting work, but about 4.5 years in, I had an entrepreneurial bug with several partners, and we created a business idea inside of that. There's a fun story there, but effectively, the business idea from the corporate entity got pushed down. The words they used were something like, tell the software we need to get back to work. Well,
software weenie.
Yes. So I really was attached to the idea. So we made a business plan and tried to strike out on our own. Now, chapter 2, started a company called Expeed, joined with 3 other partners that had been in the industry. And we built a company pretty quickly. We started it in 98. We sold it in 1999, right during the middle of all this .com. We then went public 1 month later. The stock went from a little over €7 to around €370. We were trading on the Nouveau Marché. And then the .com bust happened, and the exact reverse of that happened right when we were in realistic multiples. About half the partners abandoned because now the hard work was done, but a lot of people stayed around to really make a real business after the .com bust. And that's where I learned so much. About 6 years later, the organization that had acquired us, even though we had pretty much fully recovered, they decided that I was not part of their strategy. I got let go. That served as a source of motivation, probably rooted in shame, that led to the establishment of the 3rd chapter, which is a company called Blue Ocean Group, which quickly acquired and merged with Improving. That's where we got the name, and been there ever since. So that's the journey. There's ups and downs in the journey. There's the .com rush, the .com bust. There's the being let go from a company you started, but then starting the new business rooted in shame, but now it's rooted in growth. And that's the life of an entrepreneur.
That is the life of an entrepreneur, and not exactly the same journey, but I've been with Learn It for 30 years, and we've made it through 3 different economic downturns, and it's just you just got to keep pushing forward. There are a lot of people out there, our listeners, who are going through layoffs and really tough times, and you talk about negative emotions and shame. How are you able to use that as a driver to where you're at today with Improving?
So for me, good or bad, shame can be a big intrinsic motivator. So an internal motivator. I'm from a love language person. I'm words of affirmation. So I do worry about what people think of me? And in my head, I had a story that I was telling myself that everybody thought I was a failure. And that's a story that I was telling myself. There's a reality that very few people were probably thinking that. But it didn't matter. I didn't believe that. And as a result, in order to disprove these fictitious people out there that I had made up in my head, I worked extra hard with extra effort, and it served as a source of motivation to say, hey, I'm going to prove the people that did not believe in me wrong. But there's a key there. This is rooted in insecurity. This isn't some highly confident person that says, I don't care what other people think. There's a little shadow, but there's also the strength in that shadow. So that's how it kind of motivated. And it was a great source of drive early in our business. That has since that same energy, we truly want to become a challenger brand in our industry. So now it's making a difference in our industry. We have an opportunity to become one of the mythical unicorns over the next several years. And we have a very strong objective to do so.
And so getting to improving, first of all, I mentioned this off stage. Where'd you come up with the name? I love the name Improving.
I love the name Improving too. And it wasn't the name we came up with. Instead, we came up with the name Blue Ocean Group, which we love that name too, but it didn't last long because we quickly joined with two other partners, and they joined in. They were running a training. We were running a consulting business, and we adopted the name. Improving is a very powerful name, a name that brand can be built upon. Our motto is improving. It's what we do, but very, very both clever and rememberable name.
And let's talk a little bit about the culture and the growth. So I believe that you're up to over 2,000 employees, and the growth has been, 270 million? And you've won all these awards when it comes to culture. How have you been able to scale to that magnitude and remain having such a strong culture? Because I've found that so many companies have so many growing pains when they go through expedited growth like that.
Yeah, it's a lesson that we learned, I think, in chapter 2 of The Professional. A lot of people came from, again, that company was called Valtech, and that had acquired Expeed. A lot of great lessons learned there. And they were a French-owned organization headquartered in France. And part of what they did with good intention is try to propagate culture. However, the culture in France is very different than, let's say, a culture in Texas, and pretty significant differences. And trying to, again, coerce culture is not a great strategy, in my opinion. Instead, how do you inspire? And that's what we try to do. We create a framework around our core values. We have 3 that we consider in our identity. Those are excellence. It's not an occasional act. It's a consistent habit. Dedication, thinking of others a little more without thinking less of yourself. And involvement or engagement. Our success is a consequence of our collective involvement or engagement. Those are who we really are. Then we have one aspirational value of trust. We put these things out there. We create the language, and then we ask the local leadership to champion it in the way that resonates to their local culture. And we do this with daily practices, weekly practices, if not daily practices. So it's really leaning into the culture and making it part of your everyday vocabulary and actions, but leaving enough flexibility for the local executives and leaderships to institutionalize.
And what you're saying is the whole command and control style doesn't work anymore. It's like somebody we mutually respect, Stephen M. R. Covey. It's the inspire and trust way to go about it. And I like how you talk about, okay, you have your 3 core values, but you open it up for flexibility so that it can adapt to our local culture. Can you give us an example of how that looks in real world sense for one of these local
Sure.
chapters?
Let's take the involvement, which passionate of involvement is called engagement. So I'm also referring, we may change the word to engagement, but we've always been a company that's relied on the entire team for our success. And what does that look like? For some organizations, let's say the one in Dallas or the one in Columbus, Ohio, Houston, part of being involved with our stakeholders is opening up our space at night and really letting the community come in. But that's one of their ways of doing it. We have other enterprises that are blogging and very active online, and they're getting engaged with the online community. Right. So these are two ways where two different subgroups of people are living into that value in incredible ways, but they're not the same implementation. Yet it makes sense to the local culture. That's just one. Excellence tends to be more universal. Even though we establish it and ask the local cultures to establish it, there's a little bit more universal understanding of what that means. You know.
And when it comes to excellence, if you're in a culture or in a geographic region where it's just not happening, how do you go about that?
We grow through both inorganic and organic means. So when we acquire companies, it is one of the things that we are trying to scrutinize at a high degree. And therefore, we're bringing in communities that already value either excellence or quality almost to a T. So it's kind of built-in culture. Let's take our recent Pune acquisition out of Pune, India. InfraCloud was really committed to excellence in a particular technology set, native cloud technologies, Kubernetes, and they were widely known for their expertise, for their excellence in this. And they also are widely known for their engagement in the community, actively speaking and really being engaged in this, also blogs, white papers, things like that. So there are ways we evaluate organizations before bringing them on, and then we organically continue to grow that.
Have you ever had any instances where it didn't go well? You vetted them out and then you brought them on and it just turned out it wasn't the right culture fit or performance fit?
Yes. We've had no complete failures, which is quite amazing. None.
It is, really.
We have had a few organizations that are challenging, and one of the one would have been in the value of, let's say, dedication, but we try to vet, and we've had more than 100 best place to work recognitions. Our Ohio office has been named #1 in Ohio. Even our Texas office has been #1. We have an aspiration to create a great place to work force. Again, that's the responsibility of the executive teams locally. But when we did an acquisition, we confused a best place to work recognition with being aligned with our values. And there's a few ways to become a best place to work. One is to simply give the employees everything they ask for. If they do, of course, they're going to think you're the best place to work. But this has its detriment. It actually creates a me culture, me, me, me. What about the company, which represents the we? And so organizations, just because they get a best workplace doesn't mean they have a we culture. So we now have, and that took a little bit teasing, because whenever you try to change, people are wondering, what about me, mm-hmm. versus, hey, this change is good for the organization overall. So we vet on a we basis now instead of the me basis. Is this organization, is this leadership team really more about the we? There's we best place to work cultures and me best place to work cultures. And we've learned that. And you had to learn that through a hard lesson.
Now, if I'm a leader and I just took a new role, mid-level role in an organization, and I found out my team is a me type culture, what practical advice do you have for them to start making that shift or trying to get that organization to make that shift?
One, I would start with, we have an aspirational value of trust. That's our fourth value, but it's our aspirations. And We base a lot of our language and framework on Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust, has 4 cores, 13 behaviors. Start with the 13 behaviors. The first one might be to listen first. Just listen to what they have to say. Listen here. And I really mean listen. Don't listen to defend or to make a point. Try to listen and take it in. Give yourself time to take it in. It doesn't mean that you're not going to make change, but using those, then clarify expectations with the teams. Teams have different expectations. That's yet another trust behavior. How do you set expectations very clearly that this is where we're coming? That also deals with companies being transparent and talking straight with the employees, right? These are 4 of the 13 trust behaviors. But when you use this framework to communicate with employees, it will open up and create an easier path as you listen, consider, and then start instituting the change. One thing we can't accept is an organization living outside the core values of excellence, let's say. So we're going to have to change that. How do we do it? Start with building trust and then make the change.
I think that's so good. You see so many times people come into an organization and they think they need to make a change right away. So they just jump in. And what they don't realize is that if they sit back and they listen, they're actually building connection and trust with the individuals. So when they want to make change, it will be much easier than just jumping in and doing it. And another thing I found as well is, as a leader, when it comes to listening, let everybody else go first and you go last and listen to what they have to say. It's so very important. That's great advice. When it comes to these 13 behaviors, how do you go about practicing them, or, I don't know, doing training on them? I mean, do you get everybody together and talk about it as an organization, or does it have to be distributed through the local levels? How do you really get it ingrained in the culture?
So I want to answer that question, but I want to go back. Trust behaviors, it's an aspirational goal because we fail very often. Then we have to practice accountability, right the wrongs. Let's take listen first. And sometimes I feel a little bit hypocritical about this, but it's recognizing trying to do better, which is yet another even in the moment. So trying to listen first. I'm an ideation person. I have ideas. I may not always do that. How do we catch ourselves? I just don't want to be.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I can't help myself sometimes,
which is unfortunate for us. But then, how do we own that? How do we take accountability for that? Make small steps, reflect on it, and change. Now, how do we institutionalize trust? One thing that we do is that in order to get a promotion inside of improving, at every level, you must take a refresher of our trust course. This isn't an extensive course. You get refamiliarized with the 4 cores and the 13 behaviors. You can see I talk about them a lot because they're ingrained. So that's the first thing, is that this is part of our ethos. We want to talk this language. We want to use it as a framework for understanding. The second thing is, out of our 2,000 employees, I think at really around peak, about 1,100 or so are volunteering to participate in these 17-week cycles in something we call trustpods. We talk about the 4 cores that Stephen Covey mentions. Then we talk on a weekly basis for just about 30 minutes. And we talk about how we apply them. Then you go 13 weeks on the different behaviors. It's amazing how frequently we get the comments that by simply talking about these, it actually helps my personal life even more than my professional life. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you act in a significant way. But we have regular practices, Damon. Like it is just very regular. Then we provide the framework to do so. We do not force people to do this outside of the training, right? But we try to inspire people to do it and live into that principle as well. And
you also have a system that I think sounds great, is engage. Is that part of it too, where there's over like 200 different practices people can participate in and track and even hold themselves accountable for?
That's right. And it's less accountability, but it is part of our internal IP. I believe
accountability for themselves, though, a little bit.
And
that's what I mean.
Few things. But what Engage is intended to do is to make public how you as an employee are engaged in improving in ways that may not otherwise be known. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that we have these groups that are using our space every night, let's say in Dallas. Well, every one of those needs a host. And these people are taking time out of their evenings, let's say, to host these groups that are here. Well, they go into our Engage system and they will say, hey, I hosted this group. And let's say somebody's publicly speaking. Let's say somebody did an employee referral for a new employee or passed a business lead, or somebody took a training class, because Engage also includes our Improving University training classes, or they're planning their own career growth, which is very important. Attending a town hall. These are all things that show that employees are engaged, but also help their professional development. Every single one, even, yes, attending a town hall. And they get coins for these. These coins can be gifted amongst employees. They can be gifted amongst our Generous Advocate program, which are these 15 to 18 employee chosen charities at the end of the year that then can be given these coins to. And so we translate this engagement, this involvement, yet another way to measure and institutionalize our values. And I consider it probably one of our biggest competitive advantages is this tool and these practices.
It's like your secret sauce.
It also provides visibility throughout the organization. Let's say you're an employee and you've never met me, yet I can actually go in and office by office say, this is one of the most engaged employees, right? Who is Kyle Jenkins? I knew who Kyle Jenkins was before, but
it's amazing.
If I didn't know about that, I will be like, Kyle is extremely active. He's doing this and this and this and this. And that's at my level, right? The head of a 2,000 person organization, but that goes down to the people in charge of 500 to the people in charge of 10. It's a PR system for yourself as well.
Now, I completely agree with the visibility. As a baseball player, I'd be up to bat. There might be 10,000 people in the crowd. If I'm hitting 230, it's an accountability system for myself to get better. But when it comes to inspire over require, do you ever get some pushback from people who say, I don't like this being out there, that I'm publicly, let's say, not me, but somebody with a victim mindset that says I'm publicly shamed because I'm not doing as much as these other people are?
Oh, that does happen. It's actually one of the pushbacks that happens in our system, right? People misconstrue that it's a competition. It's not a competition. This is your vehicle for your career growth, for your visibility. It's more like the track and field event where you're looking for your personal bests, not necessarily doing a comparison out there. And, but it does. People are like, well, I don't do as much. And therefore these employees are equally as welcome. Different people go through different seasons in their life and have to put, let's say, in an integrated life, which is a different subject, not a life work balance, but integrated life. People have to put family sometimes priority. Sometimes they have to do work more. Sometimes they have to put their church or their schools or something like that ahead of time. But we understand these ebbs and flows happen. And we also understand that people put a different priority on work. This isn't about creating a system where everybody appears equal. This is about putting a system that maximizes your visibility, your contributions within the system as you choose.
And last question, I'm sure you get asked this all the time. When are you going to release it as a product?
We've productized it already. We do believe it would
externally
pertain to, I know, we're a services company. And one thing I have seen over and over and over again is service companies or product companies get confused with being the other because they see a little bit of revenue. we are not going to be a product company unless it directly serves. So for now, this is competitive advantage. In the future, we might release it, but if we did, we would completely create it as a separate entity, make sure it could live and die on its own as a separate entity, not pull down the very important resources that a service company has to have. And that's not building a product unless it directly makes your services better.
So what I hear you saying, which is you're disciplined on what you are, and you're staying there and not going to let it, chase a shiny object right now, unless it makes complete sense or makes sense. You never have anything you don't know perfectly. I want to pivot a little bit. Part of this great culture obviously has to do with leadership. I mean, you have to have the leaders modeling the behavior, like you've already mentioned several times. I also know that you are very careful with how you use the term leadership. So I'd like to explain what that is. And I think you have 3 different types of leaders.
Yeah, I'm going to change the vocabulary a little bit.
Okay.
I do a presentation that says that not every executive is a leader, and that's a good thing. So, right, I'm going to say not everybody that's in a position of authority is a leader, and that is okay. There are 3 types of people in positions of authority, or 3 types of executives. 1 is a leader. 2 is a manager, 3 is an administrator, and they have different strengths. Each of them have different strengths. Now, our culture tends to say that anybody that's in a position of authority is a leader, and I tend to disagree, and they don't all need to be. So as overall, we have a model, and what we're going to say is every executive needs a fair degree of resilience. Every executive needs to find a way that they can be trustworthiness, and they have to be positive, right? They have to be strong, this resilience. What you find is the higher you move up in an organization, the more people are throwing darts at your decisions that are being made. And you have to have a certain strength to accept that and live through that. Secondly, we have these 13 trust behaviors. You have to find your formula of establishing trust with others, or you're not going to be a great executive. And third, how many times has your favorite person that you ever worked for been negative? If you're a negative person, somebody that's always contradicting, be careful, because you're probably not going to be the world's best leader or best manager or best administrator, right? These tend to be common between all executives, things that need to be needed. But now when it comes to, let's say, leadership, there's a few things that kind of separate leaders from other executives. Initiative, by definition, they have to be initiatives. They're the ones that lead. They make the decisions. They move forward. They do so with confidence, which is the second thing, right? People that live in fear, you can temporarily get people to follow you by living in fear, but you have to exude confidence. And then finally, inspire. Leaders inspire. They don't necessarily require. Now, managers and administrators have a different set of strengths. They often happen to be very reliable, where leaders may or may not be. They have learned a system of accountability for both themselves and others, and they tend to be very responsive to their constituents. So these things, they separate, and every organization needs both. We need both leaders, and we need managers and administrators. Managers and administrators tend to differentiate themselves by what tools they use, right? A manager gets their authority through their position, while an administrator might get authority through their governance. The focus of a manager is on people and schedules. The focus of an administrator is on plans and processes and procedures, right? And so administrators focus on execution, while managers focus on planning and the managing of people themselves. And this is my 4-minute version of actually talking about an hour-long subject, but these are very important differences. We need to stop pretending that everybody's a leader, saying that let's have these great executives, let's have them focus in their strength areas.
I love this conversation because it comes across all the time. And I got another point about it. But out of curiosity, are you going out on the road and giving this keynote on a regular basis? Or is it something you want to do? I know you're so busy. I mean, you got enough going on. I'm just asking.
I want to do so. And yes, I have given this presentation several times, but I believe it's a fundamental business shift that people need to be thinking about, because our culture wants to put leader as the esteemed role. We need leaders, we need managers, and we need administrators. A very highly effective business needs all three. And if you don't get them yet, most organizations only promote leaders. And I think that's dangerous.
And when you say only promote leaders, because what I see a lot, because at Learn It, we do a lot of work on people moving into leadership roles for the first time. And it's just promoting the wrong people, because it's a completely different skill set. Somebody who is a go-getter in sales quite often doesn't make a great leader. So how do we help these organizations get out of that mind shift where everybody needs to go, that, the roadmap to success is only into a leadership role all the time?
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I'm going to find that many of the great sales professionals, the truly great ones, are inspirational and therefore tend to be able to lead. Yet what they don't become very effective at is managing others or administrating others, right? And so while you have other people, let's take in the finance community where rigor is required, whether it's process or people or plans. Financial may make great administrative executives in the organization, even if it's not in the financial area, because they're very used to these processes that protect organizations, make them flourish, make them become an engine. So it's really about understanding, and the core of this, and this is my argument, and not requiring everybody to be a leader, the inspirational person, or everybody to be the manager and be able to come up with good plans and strategies, right? It's understanding what the position needs, and then one level below, fill in. And this is why in an organization you might find layers shifting. If I consider myself to be a leader, have many of those leadership traits, initiation, confidence, and inspiration, well, I then need to make sure that somewhere in my reporting structure, I have really good managers and administrators. Because if I just put another layer of leader straight underneath me, I'm not adding the things that I don't bring.
And that's why it's so important to have a diverse team. And diversity doesn't just mean, race, color, religion, geographics. It's exactly what you're talking about here, which is skill set. Because if you just put leaders under leaders, then you're missing out on that management piece, the directions and administrative piece. And I also think that's really important for our listeners out there, that when it comes to leading and managing people, you can manage everybody differently, or just at least adapt to their leadership style, that you could help, or help them with how they like to be led, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and I do believe it's very personalized like that. Is different people have a saying, you have to be a good follower before you can ever be a good leader. Okay, but people that and you're almost always a follower. In some, I have to follow even in my own role. I have a board of directors. I have investors. I'm accountable to them. I don't have the autonomy that everybody thinks I do. But we have to adapt. It's the platinum rule, not the golden rule. You don't lead others how you want to be led. You lead others how they want to be led. And therefore you have to adapt. And some people like that manager, and some people like the administrator. Other people like to be inspired and have a lot of autonomy, and we have to adapt. And that's why you need all three skill sets. And that's why at Improving, we use the term executive to refer to people in positions of authority, not leaders, because not everybody is a leader, and that's a good thing.
And it also requires a lot of awareness. both organizationally and individually to be able to see that. And I agree. And, speaking of adaptability, let's kind of pivot here to where improving is at now. And what is it going to look like in your space with everything that's going on with AI?
Artificial intelligence is extremely important in our space. I think it's actually extremely important in all spaces. It is hyped right now, but it is hype that will stay. So effectively, the hype is beyond the capability, but the capability will catch up over time. In somewhere between 3 and 6 years, I believe this is a pervasive part of our business, which means table stakes. But what I would argue and suggest is that if you are not using agents today, artificial intelligence as assistance to help you do your job, you should find the way to do so, because you will be left behind or put at a very severe disadvantage if we're not. I heard one statistics, only 6% of the people in the U.S. are doing this. This is behind the world norm, but find the way. I just recently had one of the heads of our AI practice mirror me for 3 days, and every single meeting they would be listening to me on this podcast or whatever right next to me, so that they could tell me how I can use AI more effectively in my own job.
That was a question I was going to ask you. For a leader who realizes, or just let's change the term, executive, who realizes they have to start leveraging AI, but they're not right now, what is one easy way they can, dab their toe in it, for lack of a better term, to just get started?
So I can almost guarantee that every organization has some people that are passionate about AI right now in their organization. And I would simply say, ask them, how can I apply it to myself? If you are unsure of that, find an organization that's giving executive seminars on the subject. I know we are giving more executive seminars on this than we have on any subject for over 20 years. It is once to twice a week, packed rooms with executives, 8 to 10 people. You can do this. You could join one of ours. And what this workshop does is help you explore in your organization what you can do. And these aren't things we're just trying. This is pervasive. This will not be a differentiator for us in 3 to 4 years. That's why we're sharing our knowledge of this right now. It'll be everybody.
It'll be everybody. I mean, one of the things I like to do is I try to get my team, I have 75 people. I don't have 2,000 like you, but try to get everybody in the mindset of how can we do this better leveraging AI? Just have it part of the conversation that you can at least try and adapt. And like what you guys have is a culture where people can, I'm probably sure they can experiment, and it's okay to ask questions for how to do it. I have a question. So much about adaptability, but I know, do you still have a 10-year vision for improving, or is that out the door now because of how fast the rapid pace of change is?
No, the 10-year vision, if written properly, which we do, we have a 10-year vision. We try to live into that vision. That provides us focus. It not only tells us what to do, but if it's not on there, we have to ask, why are we doing it, right? It has to fit into that. But we also have 3-year visions, which allow us to adapt, and 1-year vision. Very occasionally, we can shift a 3-year vision, not a 1-year vision. It doesn't move that fast. So we have 1-year visions that feed into several 3-year visions, a 3-year vision that feeds in and provides focus to the 10-year vision. And these are operational visions written as if we were there 10 years in advance, looking back. We are this, and we've done this, and we've accomplished X, Y, and Z. And we do the same thing. Very, very important to provide direction and focus for an organization. Yet most companies, if I ask them if they have a 10-year vision, nobody can produce it.
No, I'd have to agree with that. Now, you say it's important. Why is it important, especially from your everyday frontline employee, or in your case, consultant's perspective?
A lot of reasons. One is hopefully executives are in the organization are focusing on that and choosing their efforts where they are focused in alignment with that. And it creates alignment, right? It also creates the accountability framework for me. Hey, why are we looking for an acquisition in this country or this location when it's not in our 3-year vision? Well, it's in our 10-year vision. I know, but it's not in our 3. Why are we doing this? Right? There might be a good answer, but it forces the conversation because it's either inside or outside of that 3-year vision. The other is it can be inspiring. We aspire to be the challenger brand in our industry. We're mid-market. We want to challenge the biggest brands. We want to challenge the Accentures. We want to challenge the KPMGs, the IBM Global Services, the Tatas of the world. All right. In the mid-market, the Globants, we want to be the challenger. And that's inspirational for people. So this provides inspiration. And now let's talk about hiring or acquisitions. An acquisition target knows where we're going. They now know whether they align with us or not. And we are much better off them opting out because they do not align than opting in because they do. So there's countless reasons for having a 10-year vision, 3-year vision, and we try to live into that.
I mean, that is such a key point that you brought up right there when it comes to acquisitions, because if it's not a fit, better to find out sooner than later. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, we got to wrap it up here. I mean, I could talk to you all day about this kind of stuff, but I do want to congratulate you on winning the EY Entrepreneur of the Year. So, congratulations with that. Somebody of your status and your level, do you still have mentors or people you turn to yourself, or how do you go about continuing to learn and grow?
Great final question. I want to first say thank you for the acknowledgement, but it feels awfully disingenuous if I were to stand up on a podium, get a recognition such as this from E&Y, and not say that this was really this is an individual recognition for a group effort, and our entire team actually deserves a recognition. Now, what do we do to continue to improve myself? I surround myself with both individuals, groups, training to try to make sure that I'm being very objective, mindful, and continuously trying to, I'm going to use the word develop, not just learn, but develop, right? We can learn things that get breadth of knowledge, but what are we doing in the adaptive learning where we are actually developing ourselves into a new type of person that changing our meaning-making system? I'm putting in a plug. There's a leadership academy out there that focuses on this, which is brilliant. Stagen, right here in Dallas. I'm very active as part of that. A community as a continue. I have YPO, which is a group of executives where we are getting together every month, and they're holding the business plan for improving was put in front of this group, and constantly trying to look. Your own employees, are you listening to them? And I'll conclude with this, that I don't have to be the person that comes up with the best ideas, but my job is to try to sift through and identify the best and highest priority ideas. So I'll end with that. It's an active part of my life each and every week.
That's great, Curtis. I mean, and for listeners, one thing I want to really point out is talking about the award he won, he turned around and he deflected the recognition to his team, which I think is what great leaders do. I had a gentleman just recently on the show, Peter Bissonnette, who led Shaw Communications, 10,000 person organization. And he said it was all about having a great team and help and making sure that the people who helped you get there and deservingly get the credit are acknowledged. So that is so important. And I loved how you talk about, whether it's YPO or others, it's getting out there and having people that you can share ideas with and have them pressure test it and get feedback from them on it. And one of the things that's so important, you said right there as well, I'm just kind of doing a recap now what we talked about, is that the best ideas don't necessarily come from us. They really shouldn't. A lot of times the best ideas come from your frontline workers. And if you create a safe space where they can share those ideas and feel heard, like you've talked about, it's so critically important. And so these are some of the reasons why Curtis and Improving has this incredible run at Inc. 5,000 Best Places to Work and other culture awards. Other things we talked about are executives, and it's okay that everybody, not everybody has to be a leader. They can be a manager or an administrator. And you got to make sure that you don't stack your organization with only leaders. And we talked about the how trust is such a crucial piece of the organization and how it's implemented throughout, and given the space from a local level to be able to adjust it to what works best for them. And we started all this conversation around conscious capitalism. We need to stop bashing it. We need to celebrate and elevate it. So, Curtis, this has been awesome. Where can our listeners connect with you at?
All right. You can find me on LinkedIn. More than happy to connect with you via that way. And I always have an email. Pretty easy. It's not hard to figure out. curtis.hite@improving.com.
Awesome. And so for our listeners out there, I want you to think about somebody who's an executive or a bunch of people who can really get value out of this episode today. Send it to them. I mean, Curtis, you've been awesome. And what I always want to say when I close out is stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you, Damon.
I came out of the media industry where communication is everything. But understanding those networks